Welcome to the third season of The Morning Glory Project, Stories of Determination. I'm your host, Betsy Graziani-Fossbender, and together with my co-producer, Angela Washington, we bring you really amazing stories of amazing people. I'm so lucky that I get to have these conversations and to share them with you. These are conversations with people who have overcome, people who have endured, people who have gone on when others might not have. They've overcome losses or tragedies, disappointments and heartbreaks, or they've seen a goal and pursued it to its end. And what I'm really fascinated by is they don't just share that they had these stories or that they lived them, but how. What were their inspirations? What were the resources they used? What ideas kept them going? How did they dig deep and find what they needed to find to go on? Because it's my belief that when we learn how someone else got through hard times or found their goals, that we learn how we might be able to do the same. Thank you so much for listening to the Morning Glory Project. And if you like what you hear, give us a like or a share on your social media site, or golly, use the good old-fashioned word of mouth and tell a friend about us. We love sharing these stories with other people. Thanks for listening. Today, I welcome to the Morning Glory Project Angela Muir Van Etten. As a dual citizen of New Zealand and the United States, Angela served as national president of both Little People organizations and qualified as a lawyer in both countries. She was admitted to the bar in New Zealand, Ohio, and New York. As a dwarf of 3 feet 4 inches, LPA has twice awarded Angela its highest honor, the Kitchen's Meritorious Service Award, for her work as a leader in banning dwarf tossing, in licensing establishments in New York and Florida, and in breaking the 6-inch reach barrier in buildings and facilities open to the public throughout America. Angela has been a legal writer and editor of disability civil rights law, books for Thomson Reuter, a staff writer for the Christian Law Associate, and an advocate and coordinator for the Coalition for Independent Living Options. Her articles on dwarfism and disability advocacy have been published in LPA Today and online in the HuffPost blog. Angela lives in Florida with her husband of 40 years, where she is active in church ministry. She's the author of 3 books. One is Dwarfs Don't Live in Dollhouses. The second is Pass Me Your Shoes. And the third, Always an Advocate. Angela, welcome to the Morning Glory Project. I'm so pleased to have you today.
Thank you. I look forward to our conversation.
So, Angela, let me do some term things because I want to do this right. You and I spoke earlier, and your preference for, you use the term dwarfism, but you typically talk about people with your condition or similar conditions as little people. Is that the term that's preferred?
Well, I hate to complicate life for people. It sort of depends on the person you're talking to. Some prefer to be called little people. Some prefer short stature. Some prefer dwarf. So that doesn't make it easy for people wanting to use the right term. The bottom line is Little People of America is actually trying to move away from the term little person and prefers people to reference the organization by using LPA. But of course, most people don't know what LPA means, so it is usually spelled out, Little People of America. But that's the history of the LPA. But I can tell you for sure, the one term that is considered very offensive is the word midget. And there's a lot of advocacy around that, a lot of businesses, sports teams, you name it, or kids or even adults making fun of people use the word midget. And it's very, very derogatory and offensive. So we steer people away from that. And for the most part, when people say, what should I call you? Best thing to do is parents are teaching their kids, just call me by my name. So it's like, we don't need a label. Let's just use the name.
Right. Well, that's going on in so many arenas. And my desire in asking the question is that I always want to call people by their preference. We have had a past guest Francine Falk-Allen, who is a polio survivor. And she, for example, she prefers the term handicapped to disabled, and other people in her arena don't like that term.
Right.
And LGBTQ, some people love being called queer, and other people find that offensive. So we're all struggling. And
it is a struggle. In fact, when I was giving a talk with some high school students one time, I thought they kind of were following along with me when I said, talking about terminology, I said, well, I grew up crippled, and then I was handicapped, and now I'm disabled. And this young man, who I had no idea hadn't followed me afterwards, he came up and said, well, how did you become disabled instead of handicapped? So it's like he actually thought I was the one who would change. He missed it. I was talking about the terminology.
Well, so I will call you Angela.
Thank you.
So Angela, can you tell me how common dwarfism of all of its varieties is? How many people would call themselves small of stature or little people? How common is it?
Well, it's not that common. The geneticists are coming up and breaking down the different types of dwarfism, breaking it out into, one type might now be two types. So over time, they say there's now about 400 different types. So depending on the type, how frequent it is, there are many that are quite rare. And then the most common type of dwarfism, which is achondroplasia, which accounts for about 60%. That occurs in about 20 to 30,000 people.
In the U.S.?
In the United States, but per live birth, 20 to 30,000 live births have achondroplasia. And then all the other variations each one would have a different incident so basically in the United States, there's probably somewhere between 30 and 40,000 people with dwarfism.
So it's a small amount. And what it means for those of us of average stature or average build is that the likelihood of having close acquaintances with this condition is slim. And so it's a novelty in a way. And one of the things that you and I talked about before this is that for some of us, the only acquaintance we have, other than the occasional sighting of somebody who is small, is that we've seen, television programs and The Wizard of Oz and circus kinds of things from the past.
Right.
And so there's this very weird feeling that I have around it, which is that I know that there's been exploitation of people with conditions like yours, and I don't want to contribute to that in any way. So when I encounter somebody, there is still also an admitted, I'll call it curiosity, as opposed to, I don't want to ever ogle somebody or anything like that, anybody who has any condition. So there's a curiosity, and that's what I want to enter our conversation with, which is basically, tell me what it's like to have the condition that you have. What are the challenges, and what drives you crazy, or what are the pluses?
Well, the curiosity factor is definitely there, and partly it's because, as you say, it's unusual for somebody to come across somebody with dwarfism, but it's also can be used to our advantage, and that a lot of people, especially as you're an adult and you're trying to find a way to stand out, you're paying people pay a lot of money for marketing, advertising, and we have an automatic
distinction.
When I was practicing law, the thing that people would try and show that how different they were, it could be their hat or whatever, is number one, you can be underestimated. And so that worked to my advantage, because people look at you and don't think you're going to be able to do much of anything. And of course, that's totally wrong, because a little person can accomplish just as much as anybody else.
Do you think that people kind of project a childlike quality? They assume They assume a child's capabilities, I guess is what I mean. When that's obviously, it seems so absurd, but we project all kinds of assumptions on people because of how they look, right?
Right. And so you're not treated as you should be. You can be put on a pedestal and patronized, or you're not equal because you're put up on this position where you don't belong because you can't fit in. I mean, we want to fit in, and we are able to accomplish most of what other people do.
That sounds like what I have heard termed the bigotry of low expectations.
Yes.
That people, that's that weird pedestal. They elevate you simply because you don't want to be reduced because you're a small person, and you don't want to be elevated because you're a small person. You want to be respected for the capabilities and talents and accomplishments of your own, irrespective of your size.
Right. And so the advantage when people do remember you, so the curiosity and so we're in a situation where we need to talk, maybe it's a business setting or, getting served in a restaurant. If you come back, people are going to remember you. Mm-hmm. And so it's in your interest to be polite, because if you're not, then it's going to come back to hurt you later.
Well, that strikes me as, like you say, it can be an advantage, but it also seems like there's a certain conspicuousness to being different.
Yes.
And that it draws attention, and that then you can't have the same flub ups that other people might have, because it would stick in the memory more.
Well, yeah, that it does, but we actually do have the same flub ups, of course.
Of course.
So we're not above other people, we're not below other people. So we just, if I accept myself for who I am, and I'm not apologetic, I'm not ashamed, I'm not hiding, and then I come out and I get introduced to someone and we go on as though it's just a normal greeting, well, then people start to relax. That curiosity thing kind of wears off. People get tired of that. So the curiosity thing is mainly a problem among strangers. Once you have the opportunity to interact with people, then they come to appreciate, hey, she can talk. She's
not just this package.
Yeah, she can talk better than me, or, as happens, when you're in a professional setting, people find out, well, maybe this case better than they do, and so they don't put out their best effort, and then they regret that.
Well, so there are two, I'm thinking kind of three challenges. One that we've been talking about, which is this kind of social stigma and the conspicuousness and people's assumptions about that. The other two that come to mind as I think about it and as I've read bits of your story is, first of all, just the physicality. Not only the health challenges that come, it's not just that your body is smaller. There are challenges that come with dwarfism of various types, and different challenges with the different variations of all of the strange chromosomal differences and all of that.
Skeletal is more common than the chromosome. Yeah, there are chromosomal causes, but primarily it's skeletal.
And so those challenges impact your physical health.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit about that? What do the skeletal challenges cause? What kinds of challenges do they bring?
Well, again, it's specific to each different type. And the most common type, as I mentioned, achondroplasia, which we abbreviate to ACONs, not acorns, to ACONs.
ACONs.
Is when I say we, I'm talking about people who are members of LPA. Mm-hmm. Spinal problems. There's a narrower spinal cord, and that over time can cause a lot of little people, as they get older, have issues with spinal stenosis, which is the narrowing causes problems with the spinal cord, which can create paralysis and needs for surgery. And sometimes those surgeries go well, sometimes they don't. Many people have multiple surgeries. And then with the legs, there's an issue with the bowing of the legs, which thankfully there is a fairly common surgical procedure that's available to straighten that. Because if you don't get that done, then as the person grows, their foot is going in there on their ankle, and so it really affects mobility. So there's a procedure. An orthopedic surgeon can usually take care of that, but often you see older people that never got that done, and their mobility is quite limited. And then there's issues with the ear, nose, and throat. Again, it's all to do with the canal as being smaller.
Which is why very often there's a difference in the voice quality.
Possibly. I never thought about the voice being related to that. But yeah, a lot of children, young children, they have continuous ear infections. So they'll get tubes put in. So I guess going back to the spine, there can be fluid and problems. So it's really important for parents to be involved medically to know. That's why the diagnosis of the type of dwarfism is really important, so that you know what medical issues are likely to crop up and need to be managed.
Right. Well, so, and then the third area that I think about is the physical challenge in the world, just because, I mean, I think about counters being high and steps and curbs and those kinds of things. And I know that's where your book, Always an Advocate, really focuses upon what you've done in terms of advocacy for not only physical access, but also anti-discrimination. So can you tell me a bit about your life as an activist? And an activist advocate?
Yes. Again, going back to, some questions people ask when I was working as an advocate and would give presentations on, Disability Awareness Day, those kind of things. Somebody asked me, how long have you been an advocate? Which is really where the title of the book came from. And I thought about it for a while. I thought, wow, I don't remember ever not being an advocate. So it's like always, like, so your whole life, you're advocating to be included, to be, not left out, to be, maybe the counter can't be changed in the moment, so you need to find a way to reach things, like in the grocery store, advocate for yourself, ask people to pass you something. But there, of course, now everybody hopefully knows about the Americans with Disabilities Act, since it was passed in 1990, but you'd be amazed how many people are still not following it. That law requires businesses, any place that's open to the public, to be accessible to people with disabilities, and that includes people in wheelchairs and people who use walkers and canes, and it helps little people as well. So there needs to be either a part of that building or say it's a counter, the service area, there should be an area that's lower down so that a person in a wheelchair or a person with dwarfism. Right. Usually we're standing looking at each other eye to eye, actually. We have a lot in common. And although also a lot of little people do use wheelchairs or scooters for mobility, because mobility, distance walking is problematic, right, including for myself.
And one of the photographs that you shared with me that we're circulating around is a picture of somebody who is in front of an ATM machine that has been lowered. And, that's one of the things that for somebody of average height like myself, you don't even think about how hard it would be just to get cash out of a machine.
Yes, and Little People of America appointed me as a delegate. That didn't just happen by accident. That was a long, long battle, and a fierce battle with industry that did not want to lower, and it wasn't the lowering of the ATMs now is required for new and renovated, but you don't renovate an ATM. If new installation, they have to have meet I call it breaking the 6-inch reach barrier, and there's a whole chapter on that, what it took to get that change. And because there's not enough of us to have been a powerful enough lobby group for them to lower the ATMs, gas pumps, automatic, gas pumps, anything that you need to use that needs a push or a pull or a turn cannot be higher. The accessible piece can't be higher than 48 inches.
Well, and that it doesn't just help people of small stature. It helps those in wheelchairs or with other kinds of physical challenges.
That's where I'm going with this. So we collaborated with other disabilities. I did research and discovered that there will be 500,000 people, at least 500,000 people, that will benefit from lowering the height. And of course, when you get a regulation change, this was a building code change, started in state and local building code standards. Then we were able to carry it through into the federal code, which is under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So now it is also federal law, and that was a very long process, which took a lot of energy and time, but it was well worth it to make this happen. But anyone who wants to know how you get through these things, is the Always an Advocate discusses that in detail and shows the demand for perseverance, a lot of patience, a lot of ability, willingness to work with people who don't agree with you at all, but you have to talk to them anyway, because you need to find out what makes them tick. Why are they so opposed? I even had to talk to the in this standard setting organization called American National Standards Institute. It's a very long name, but I was talking to the representative for physical therapists, and you'd think she would be supporting access, a change to accommodate people with physical problems. And there she was voting with industry. So I actually got myself seated next to her one meeting, and I point blank asked her, I said, why? Why are you voting with industry and against the people you're here to represent? And it's like, apparently that pulled her up, and not literally in the moment, but made her start thinking about that. So when it came time for the final vote, and there were actually many votes along the way, but she did vote for access. And so it's really important when you're advocating for something that's unpopular. And it was definitely unpopular when I started out in there and in that setting, because it wasn't my normal place to be with building owners and architects and engineers and, building code officials and manufacturers. I mean, it was a whole big learning curve. So if you want to advocate for something, you really have to find out, where do I go? Who's responsible for this decision to put this up at so high that I can't reach it? Who do I go to talk about getting a change?
Well, and the resistance seems of two types. One is either a lack of understanding or empathy for the condition, and the other one is because it costs money to change things sometimes. People get kind of hinky when you start talking about their pocketbook. Right. So, Angela, I want to switch gears just for a second and talk about, here you are. You're this amazing dynamo of a person. Whatever your size, you're a dynamo. And I want to go back and think about what it was like to grow up and be you, and what is the hard part about this? Not only the health challenges, but were there times in your growing up time that this was just a really painful or difficult thing for you? You sound so boisterously self-assured that I want to ask about a time when perhaps that wasn't so.
I think the teenage years are the hardest, because when your friends start dating, and I had lots of friends, and many of them were boys, but when it came time to ask somebody to the school dance, well, I wasn't the one they asked. So you feel left out, and I had times. And the same, even at university, I had friends, but, there was no romance associated with it. So, yes, that really is one of the hardest things to deal with, I think. But the way that I got through this is, first, I have to credit my parents, because they raised me as they did my brother and sister, with the same expectations.
And your brother and sister are of average size.
Correct. And that's more common than not. Most families, when they have a dwarf child, if there's usually, only one in the family, but of course there are exceptions if it's depends on their genetics. We won't go there. We don't have time for that. But there are families with more than one. But if it's an average-sized couple having a child, they usually don't have many children. With dwarfism, they may, so I'll leave it at that. But so, yes, I was expected to do my chores. I was disciplined when I, didn't do what I was supposed to do. And my mother had to be really strong, because if she was, stopping me from doing something, or in public, people would came up to her and said, "Oh, you can't talk to her like that," because I was kind of cute. And I was always little, much smaller than, I'm smaller than an adult, but I was always smaller than all the kids. So,
Right.
I looked maybe when I was 7 or 8, I might have looked like I was 3 or something.
And here she was giving you a mother's natural corrections for a 7 and 8-year-old.
Yes.
She was treating you like the age that you were.
Yes,
but
yes.
it looked as though she was talking to a 2-year-old.
Right. And so my mother remembered her saying to this elderly man, he probably wasn't that elderly, but to me he was at the time, "She knows exactly what she's doing."
Well, so it sounds like your parents raised you to have this, I was going to say this strong backbone, ironically, but to have this core identity of being treated just like everybody else, having the same expectations.
Yeah, I had that. Yeah. Also, our family, we were a Christian family, and so I grew up as a young child coming to know Jesus as my friend and my strength. And I always, throughout my whole life, when I was feeling really down or desperate and why isn't this working out, and it's like I would pray and read my Bible and find strength in that. And so everything I have done has always come back to, what does God want me to do? And every decision I've made as an adult, I've trusted him to do the best for me, because that's what he's promised.
So your faith is a place where you draw strength as well.
Oh, yes.
So I want to touch on one more thing with our limited time, if I may. And that is, in your bio, I read that part of your advocacy was to help ban dwarf tossing, which is just such a bizarre and weird and horrifying thing to me.
Yes.
How recently has that still been legal in the U.S.?
Well, there hasn't been a need for a law until it pops up out of the blue. So there's only 2 states where it's actually against the law. And you'd think
wait. There's only 2 states where this is against the law?
Correct.
So dwarf tossing, which is a game where you literally throw the body of a dwarf person.
Yes.
For some sort of weird competition, I'm gathering. I can't imagine.
People pay to enter, and so you can throw the dwarf the farthest. The dwarf person is volunteer, obviously willing, and is paid, is on staff, if you want to call it staff. But no, it's a sideshow kind of thing, and it was going on in bars and pubs and places where they do crazy things, and with a beer drinking crowd. When it first was going on, it was Florida and New York are the 2 states with laws, and Chicago, it came up in Illinois. We were able to shut it down. Little People of America was able to stop it in Chicago through public relations. And then in Florida, what happened, it needed to be a law because they took their show on the road. And if I wasn't living here at the time, but every time you'd go to the local government officials to put a stop to it, they moved on to the next town. So the only way to stop it was a state law, and that same thing happened in New York. But you can't get a law passed unless you show there's a problem. So if it's not happening in your state,
so you have to wait until it pops up. It's astounding to me. But of course, I have to also say, I find that MMA fighting and there's all kinds of strange people, strange things that people will subject themselves to.
Yes.
But this one just has a particularly vulgar hint to it. So I want to ask you, in addition to your faith, another part of what you've really focused on too is your marriage.
Yes.
That you and your partner have forged this life together. Tell me what it is about your partnership that gives you the strength to continue carrying on and doing what you each do.
Well, I guess love, I shouldn't say I guess. Love is the key to that. But a lot of, we're both little people. We both are very strong willed, and that in a marriage can be a problem.
Well, I imagine you're subject to the same problems that
Yes,
every
it's the
marriage
same
has.
as everyone. So a lot of people that get married as little people that are attracted to each other because of their commonality relating to their dwarfism, that is not enough to keep a marriage running. That might get it started, but not keep it going. Now, we've been married for 40 years, but at the 10-year mark, we did have to go to counseling. We were having communication issues. My husband had developed workaholic traits, and so he wasn't coming home, and it was like, well, this is not good. So we were having all kinds of problems. So we did go to counseling. The therapist thought, oh, yeah, we can take care of this in a couple of sessions. Or 12 sessions later.
Well, that's still, I'm a therapist. I can tell you 12 is pretty short.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So that's a good
we
time.
kind of had like about as much as we could take at that time, and we needed to put into practice what he was teaching us. And yes, so, and there are times, you go through where things are going great and things when they're not going so well. So you just hang in there. It's a commitment. You just accept that this are not all going to be good.
You're saying pretty much what I was getting from your book, which is that many of the things that you went through as a couple are exactly what my partner and I go through, what other
Yes.
of us go through. And so there are some wonderful anecdotes in there that can help inspire couples of any size.
Correct.
For those who want to learn more about advocacy, that your book, Always an Advocate, has many, many resources for those who may have a child or a loved one with dwarfism or with other physical limitations. There's so many resources in all of your books about how to find what you need, how to press on, how to insist upon what is required. And I thank you for the good fight that you're fighting on behalf of those who have physical challenges. I'm so grateful that you are using your brilliant mind and your sharp wit and your good humor and your advocacy to help people like yourself and so many, many more. Thank you, Angela Muir Van Etten, for being part of the Morning Glory Project and sharing your story with me today.
Thank you very much.
Since my conversation with Angela Muir Van Etten, I've been thinking about pedestals and how we talk about them. When we say we put someone up on a pedestal, that sounds like a compliment, doesn't it? We elevate them. In other words, we hold them in esteem, like as if they were a statue in a museum. And sometimes I often hear women say, that a man puts them on a pedestal and they feel special in that way. But the way that Angela was talking about it is that it's as if she's treated specially just because of her physical challenges, as if she's somehow virtuous or better than because of that, which is ironic because I think often we look at people with physical challenges, limited abilities, whatever vernacular is comfortable for you. We look at folks in a negative way. We put them below the standard that we would hope for others. We think that they can do less or they're less capable. And in the case of dwarfism, as Angela talked about, they're often thought of as children or less developed or less mature or less capable. But it seems to me when I think about pedestals in general, they're really better used for statues than for people. When we elevate someone on a pedestal because of love or romance or because of admiration, then it seems that a pedestal is sort of a shaky platform, isn't it? It can tip over. And if someone has or reveals, of course, the flaws or the errors or challenges that they have, then all of a sudden they're knocked off that pedestal. The more I think about it, the less I like the idea of being put on one. It seems kind of lonely up there as a statue by yourself. I think I'd rather sit beside someone on a bench and have a conversation than be elevated to a pedestal. It seems that mutuality, reciprocity, mutual respect, seeing each other as equals, even if we're different, seems like a way better way than popping people up onto and knocking them off of pedestals. That's my extra bloom for today, just something I've been thinking about. Thanks so much for listening to the Morning Glory Project. I'm always honored by your time. And I hope that wherever you are, that you're finding a beautiful little ray of sunlight that's allowing you to bloom.